Morning. Everybody's doing well. See, oh, there's one smiling face. Hi, Zena. Hi, Megan. Hold on a second. It's disruptive behavior. Awesome. Yeah, good to see you guys. Hopefully, Kylie will be with us shortly. Cool. Yeah. Well, we're just getting our morning coffee in. So bear with us a little bit as we kind of ease into the call today. Yeah, I recall last week talking a little bit at the beginning of our call about race mindset. And then we finished the call talking about redemption races. And we spent quite a bit of time talking about that, or revenge races. If you guys missed that, that's kind of the race that you do, you know, like a month after your DNF because you were upset about your DNF. And it's kind
I would say it's anytime you're doing a race and you're attaching why you're doing the why behind why you're doing that race to the outcome of a previous event, which is inherently not that great.
Yeah. And well, yeah, great. Because you just kind of segued over to what I wanted to talk about at the beginning of this call before going into some questions today. But yeah, that conversation kind of really stirred the pot with my athlete roster. And I think a lot of people felt very sensitive about that subject. And I think that can be very telling about how we're setting our goals. It can be very telling about the emphasis we're putting on our goals, and how much we are holding tightly to the outcome of one day in a running life. And that can be really problematic. And so, yeah, I think the note that I have on this subject for today is just like, this can't be all about the races all the time. That would be a very unbalanced and unhealthy approach. Yes, we want to have goals. It's very important. I think kind of in the same vein as what, you know, I wrote about this week in the Rad Weekend update. The races, yeah, they're like totally necessary, right? Or like your big focus adventures. And they're necessary because they act as a strong singular representation and celebration of like the work that you're doing and the passion you have for running, the love for the sport, the community, the wanting to express the fullness of all of that, and your fitness and all the things that you've been working really hard on. But I think it's really important to kind of reframe that, because a lot of easy running days and tough workouts and a lot of just one day at a time, one step at a time, add up to create the full environment in which you can then go and run the race, both external and internal environment. So if the singular focus is on this 100-miler, you know, and that's all you care about, that's a problem. Because that's going to put a lot of emphasis on what the outcome of that event is. And if it doesn't go your way, that can lead to some challenging situations mentally and emotionally. And two, I think you miss out on the point of all this, which is like the journey. That finish line at the end of your 100 isn't just about the 100. It's also about every run that you completed along the way, all of the tough moments that you worked through, all of the workouts that you did that you didn't think like you were ready for, and then you like crushed them and you said hell yes at the end. You know, it's all about those small celebrations too. All of those things adding up together, the sum of their parts, that's the finish line at that event. It's not just the 100 miles that you ran or the 5K that you did. This can be for any event that you work, for many months on. it's not just about the hundreds, even though for some reason I might just like start to reframe that, you know, the 10K that you're training for, because I don't want to overemphasize the 100 miles.
No, I mean, rarely can I make overly broad, like paint my athletes with a broad brush, but I actually feel like my team is in a really great place with racing. And I don't really have any athletes that I stress about over identification with races.
That's good.
Go team.
Yeah, I think, you know, I have a different team. We all of our coaches have different
personalities,
teams.
different.
Yeah. And so, you know, I think this year for my team, yeah, some of my athletes had some great successes. Others had some really tough days.
I honestly think it's almost worse if you have successes, because then you start to really tie your ego to the outcomes of certain things. Like sometimes failure can be such a gift in that it teaches you the pitfalls of over identification with performance and outcomes. And, you know, not that I'm like, you know, no one wants to like go into a race like I want to learn about failure, but like it is a really great auxiliary to that experience. Whereas like potentially if you go out and like, you know, it's hard to get the kind of feedback that you get in races other places in daily life, right? Like very rarely do I do something at work where people are like literally physically cheering for me and telling me I'm awesome and like leaving comments about what a badass I am. But like you can get that at like any trail race, right? Like I don't have kudos for like my work. I don't get kudos every time I do laundry. Otherwise I would probably do laundry more. And so it's very easy to want to do the racing thing or the running thing more and more and more, because I think it's good, right? Like having those feedback mechanisms that help incentivize healthy, positive behaviors are good. But the downside is when the need for recognition or validation starts to drive the boat, as opposed to, you know, being a system that helps keep you, you know, happy and on track.
Right. And that's kind of the whole point, right? So I think when we are constantly fixated on the end result, the thing that we're training for, the opportunity to really enjoy the process, the present moment, the run that you're in today, not the run that's tomorrow, not the run that's next week, not the 100-miler in 1 month, 10K in 1 month, you know, we really lose an opportunity to connect with the process. And yeah, and I think part of that, you know, at least for me as an athlete is like a self-discovery thing, because I think that training for long periods of time, and so many of you guys on the call, you know, have done a lot of races. I've been your coach for a lot of races, or you've done a lot of races and are now working with us. So you've been involved with this for a long time. And I think that the more joy that you can get out of the daily process, the more relaxed you end up going into the race anyways. And that's a huge benefit. And something that's really important that Zoe mentions is like when you've had a lot of success at races, the expectation to continue to have success and to have more success, and build upon that success is kind of always there, right? So that's something that, you know, is mostly self-imposed. And so, you know, we can kind of circle back a little bit to the conversation we had last week. And we're talking about kind of that, that zero mindset going into races, where you really focus on being present, running the race that you're in without thinking about the races that you've done before and what those results were. You know, you're starting that race at zero. Doesn't matter what I did before. I won multiple races before. Awesome. Great for me. I still have to run this race, and this race is objectively difficult. The outcome of these events are completely unknown, because as all of you guys know, like there are so many factors that go into having a successful day. You know, like my last race, I face planted at like mile 1.5 and stubbed my toe so bad, and it still hurts. And I was like super lucky. I tore up my shirt, my bib. I was like, okay, I don't know how this day is going to go. I'm at 1.5 miles into this race. I've got 50 miles more to run. Like, just going to have to take it 1 mile at a time to see if my toe hurts or if it doesn't. And so like, there are little things like that, like we had a good friend who trained like 6 months for Leadville 100, sprained his ankle at mile 6. We were there. We were going to pace him.
We were like ready to go.
Yeah.
He was ready to send it. He was fit, like he was prepared. He knew what he was doing, and the universe just had other ideas.
Mile 6, and his ankle was like this. It was huge. Definitely wasn't going to be able to complete
Yeah, like
the
at
race.
no point were we like, oh yeah, walk it off, bud.
And yeah, so I think really fortunately that like athlete is super strong mentally and like really loves the training process. So
shout out to public school teachers for being the strongest mentally.
Luke's the best.
Good luck throwing a teacher and or parent too far out of whack.
Yeah. Gosh. So I really wanted to mention that I personally have a number of athletes running really long distances this weekend. And I think that it's,
oh yeah, shout out to the team going to Javelina.
Yeah, we've got a big crew at Javelina this week.
They're probably not on the call because they're enjoying being at Javelina.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Some of them are really dedicated to the calls, but I'm glad that they're taking extra time. Yeah, to get ready. So I mean, set yourselves up for success. Try to engage in the daily process. Just try to find some joy out there. Especially, we're kind of getting into those winter months. We've got a couple questions about winter training.
Kind of that season where you have to manufacture
some
joy.
Yeah. And like,
me, or like, I don't know, like when there's not mountains and like, it's like a lot of golf course running and the weather's not like super pleasant. It's like, I feel like there's a lot of mornings where Kylie and I text each other at 9 a.m. We're like, have you run yet?
I saw Kylie with the dogs 2 days ago. They were all happy.
Kylie's strong incentive is having 2 dogs that really desperately need exercise.
They were running her. She was being,
for sure.
They were like dog sledding out there. Cool. So I just wanted to mention that. I hope that resonates with you guys. Just trying to engage in the run that you're in rather than be totally focused on your goals all the time. Goals are great, but spread them out. Enjoy the run that you're in. I think that's super important. And also, a good thing is to like just create an environment in which you can enjoy the run that you're doing, especially when winter comes around. So like, I know I'm very like sound motivated when I run. And so like what I listen to can really dictate my mood. So if I listen to like a podcast, like for example, if I was listening to some like Brene Brown last winter during my runs, way too mentally engaging, way too emotional for me to run to. I mean, like I couldn't run more than like a 9-minute mile. Listening to that, I was very distracted. And so like I have to like consciously choose what I listen to. Zoe listens to like Lizzo when she runs because it's like, very upbeat and it's like uplifting and it kind of helps to motivate out there. So, figure out what works for you and do that and kind of get that formula down. It really helps. Maybe we'll start off with a question here kind of in the same, that's really similar to this topic because I think what you mentioned about expectations is just like hugely important. I know that that's made a big difference for me in my racing and trying to like cultivate a mindset in which like I don't bring any previous races into the current race that I'm running. So here's a really great question. It's a long one, so bear with me here on the reading because it crosses two sheets of paper. Letting go of expectations of others. Leading up to a race or a monumental training event, how can we help keep our progressive mindset intact when others expect us to have or relay to us the necessity of more tangible goals? Often family, friends, and colleagues will ask what our goals are in a race, and it can be hard to relay the deeper experience to them. They might even think that they are being supportive in setting standards based on what they think you are able to achieve. And there's a couple of little examples here. You're going to finish faster than the cutoffs. I bet you're going to be first place in your age group, etc.
I feel like that's actually a really great question.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think that this really is in line with like the last couple of weeks of what we've been talking about on these calls. You want to give a stab at it, or
Yeah.
Kylie, give a stab at it
Whatever
first?
people ask me, like I'll share if I have a goal that I feel like sharing, maybe it'll get shared with TJ or like Kylie or her partner Sean, because they're my like close friends who kind of understand how I operate. But I feel like anyone outside of that immediate circle, I just tell them I'm gonna send it. And then they can interpret that however they want. Because like a send can look very different. You know, I think like to me, sending it means just like giving it your best and then a little bit more. But like really staying engaged with it and like trying to take smart risks.
Yeah.
And I don't think you owe it to people who aren't close to you to like tell them what your goals are. And like, I think it's totally fine. Like I always set boundaries with like TJ around like if we're doing a race together and he's like maybe talking about it more than I feel like is super helpful for my mindset, I'll be like, yeah, I don't really feel like actually getting into it. Like I kind of know what I want to do, but talking about it isn't really going to be helpful for me and might spur ruminating. And you don't owe it to like call, like, I don't know, if some random dude at your work wants to like tell you how fast to pace your next marathon. Like you don't owe him that. You can just be like, yeah, thanks, dude. I don't know.
Yeah,
like I don't think that that's super helpful or appropriate. And I would never tell a friend anything other than like, they're going to crush it.
I think it's interesting. Yeah, what people feel that they have the right to comment on.
Yeah. And I think it's like coming from a good place.
Of course, but it's interesting to me.
Yeah. And I know we all approach goals differently, but like I would be very uncomfortable if like going into a bigger race, someone was like, oh yeah, you're gonna do this. Just because I'm like, well, you don't really know. Like you just don't know what it feels like to be in my body, and you don't know what it feels like to be in my head right now. So you just don't have all the data, and that's fine. It's just like if someone has an incomplete data set, which they do, you should feel completely within your rights to discount their conclusions.
Yeah, and I don't think, I think sometimes when people have trouble expressing the deeper experience, yeah, maybe that's a sign that you haven't come to quite a conclusion yet with regard to what that actually is for you as an athlete, and also maybe a sign that you haven't completely wrapped your head around like, okay, what are my like experience process oriented goals for this event versus like my performance goals. And I think that sometimes when an athlete has trouble conveying information to somebody else who's on the outside, that's often because they feel a little bit vulnerable about what they're talking about. Maybe they haven't quite gotten to a place where they're able to like own that. Like, this isn't about winning. This is about like having the best day that I can have. And when I have that mindset, that often puts me in a position to do really well. And maybe I can be on the podium or something like that, or win my age group.
Yeah. I often feel like my most competitive, really talented friends, like, again, like TJ, Kylie, Sean, are never the people who do that, because like they've been there, they've like, they've been competing and like putting themselves out there at races, and they know that it's like pretty radically uncool to foist random ass expectations on someone.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah, definitely.
I think the best is when you're like running something longer, and then people are like, what's your mile time? And then they start they'll start giving like unsolicited advice that happened with their relative in such and such a race or something. Like, I think that's kind of the worst is that. And then it just reminds me of like, in the nutrition world, people give like unsolicited nutrition advice that like they know nothing about. And so it's like, in my mind, it's a similar thing. Like, I mean, people come from a good place, but at the same time, if you start going into your goals, then they might add like certain things that honestly have nothing to do with your entire experience.
Totally. Like what they're looking for is like, they want to connect with you, but they don't know how. Like, I mean, and this is like, I'm very sensitive about this stuff, but like anytime a man tries to tell me shit about ultra running, I just can't do it. Like I run a magazine and I'm a professional coach. So like, thank you, random guy from Carbondale, but like, no, I really don't need your input on how to, do anything really.
That could be very indicative of a lot of things for both parties.
I mean, if it was someone that was better than me at running and knew more, I would take it. But if it's just a man assuming he knows more, I will not take it.
I'll just let it go.
I can't
do that all the time. This is what that question is. It's like, oh, hello, colleague at the water cooler. Are you going to win your race this weekend?
Well, I mean, no, what it really is like, you'll meet a random guy just out and about living life as a woman who's like, oh, did you know that people like run 100 miles? It's so sick. There's this big race in Leadville. And you're like, oh, I had no idea. Please tell me more.
Yeah,
like the amount of times that has happened to me.
They don't know
like
you.
3. Yeah, but what it does, and sorry, tangent, it functions on the assumption like I am a man, this is a woman, men do physical things outside. Therefore, as a man, I must inherently know more than this woman without me investigating, like, does she do this professionally?
Okay. So
that's why it's offensive. It's not.
I think you can exercise a benefit of the doubt for that.
No.
For that guy.
It's a pattern. There's no doubt.
Okay. Anyways, let's stay on track here. I've lost my place. Okay. So yeah, I think really a lot of what this comes down to is one, like, let's make sure you know what your goals are. So that way, if you do have this conversation with somebody, you're able to articulate those. And I think that this is something with Zoe and I that we talk a lot about, like at home. It's like, and we're working on like, what are your values? How do your values connect with like your process-oriented goals? How do your values connect with the things that you do day to day? How do they connect with the races that you choose to do? How do they connect with, like, if you have a performance goal in mind? How is all of this connected? Because if you're like really in touch with those deeper, more introspective thought processes, and I think, knowing your values, that's not like the deepest of the deep. Everybody should take a few minutes to think about what they are, because that's very, very important. You're going to be a little bit more equipped to like have that conversation with somebody. If you want to convey, like, for me, it's not about, oh, whether I win or not. It's about like just having the best day that I can, enjoying the moment, experiencing time with the community, whatever it might be. Somebody might not understand why would you be competing then? Why would you sign up for a competition? And so, maybe I'm signing up for this competition because like my values, it feels good for me to be in this like very communal environment, supportive environment. And that's where I feel I can do my best. Being able to kind of, you don't have to like explain it, but give somebody one word, or you could just be cool and be like, hey, I just enjoy this stuff. It's not about racing. So I think that for a lot of athletes, it's just like about owning that story, your narrative a little bit, and being confident with it.
Totally.
Yeah. Kylie, I would love to hear a little bit more from you if you've got any, tidbits.
Sorry, the dogs were going nuts and I was like they saw a dog outside. And I got distracted, but otherwise, I mean, I feel like I don't have anything additionally to add to the conversation that's different than like what Zoe was saying. So, I mean, I think we can move on.
Well, what about the topic of like somebody who's putting performance pressure on you? For example, I think that this is something that I've seen happen with my athletes, where like one of my athletes has like been training a long time. They put a lot of work into like preparing for this race. And there's been some like strain there because we all have a lot of priorities and things to get done. And so like when we're out running for long periods of time on a weekend, it can be challenging for the other partner who's at home. And sometimes there's an expectation, like, especially in these really long races, or for an athlete who's trying to do a distance that they've never done before, there's an expectation that that athlete completes the race, and the partner puts that expectation on the athlete who's training, because you invested all of this time in doing this. So in order for that investment to pay off, and for you to prove to me that it was worth it, that you go and complete the race. And this is something that I've seen many, many times. I think that this is sometimes something internally that athletes can go through as well. And so like that expectation can be really damaging, I think, to an athlete, be very difficult to, to like be at peace with, and then to let go so you can go and have the best day for you, whatever that is. And I think, I don't know if that kind of framing
I
of
think
this question.
it comes down to having a conversation with your partner. But, I feel like relating it to something that someone else might relate to, like if they're trying to achieve a specific goal and like maybe come up short of that specific goal, you can kind of relate it to that and how much time and effort they put into it, but maybe didn't achieve what they were originally hoping to achieve, and then kind of reframing it into, the experience itself and the value that brought to you, and like bringing that relation into the conversation that you would have with said partner, maybe, if that's kind of what you're getting at.
I feel like you just have to, and it's totally understandable if like someone, just has a different relationship to sport and movement and outcomes, but like being able to really clearly communicate that like I've trained as hard as I can, I am prepared as I can be, but nothing is guaranteed, right? Like preparation does not entitle you to the day that you want to have. It sets you up to having the highest potential to achieve that, but in no way does it guarantee it. And being able to communicate that to your partner, like, I don't know what's going to happen out there. I'm going to give it my best to honor the time that I've spent here. But just know that like, that's the project. Like, I'm not here to prove that it was time well spent, because I know in my heart of hearts that that was valuable time. And I think that for me, I know the goal is wrong if I fall short and it feels like it was time wasted. But like, I'm thinking about like the process, like when we were training for Telluride Mountain Run, we trained really hard and really specifically, but I also really enjoyed the training. Like I loved getting up in the mountains. It was super fun. It was a lot of early mornings and late nights and a lot of driving, and it was definitely not easy. But at the end of it, I was like, if I come in DFL, like this will still have been really fun and time well spent. So like, this is a good goal for me.
Yeah. And I think that that's huge. Like you just shifted everything from the outcome of the race to the journey to the process of getting to that start line, and then hopefully eventually the finish line, which is really fundamental. And I think that you mentioned earlier, like your athletes on your roster right now are like really in touch with kind of like this way of thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really indicative of like having had a lot of these experiences and been doing this for quite a bit of time. Rather, like newer athletes are going to struggle a lot more with this, because these concepts are things that you're literally building neural pathways in your brain every single time that you have this conversation, and you choose to, own the journey and then own that with somebody else who's putting an expectation on you, rather than be like, okay, well, my performance goal is X, Y, and Z. I think that these are things that like, don't expect that you're going to get it right, every single time. Know that this is a process. It's not about being perfect. Don't judge yourself if like somebody says to you, well, why aren't you going out there to win? Or like, why don't you have a time goal? Like, I hate that. Do you have a time goal for your race?
Oh my God, I hate that. I can't do math. Are you kidding me?
Right?
Like it's hard enough to run an ultra. I'm not going to make a good spreadsheet about it.
Like my coach never asked me what my time goal is. I never tell him what my time or performance goals are. And I almost never even set a performance goal for myself at a race anymore, because once you do that, all of a sudden, when the numbers aren't adding up out there, you take yourself out of the present moment. You stop running the mile that you're in. You stop thinking about the process-oriented goals that add up over the course of a long race to get you to the finish. And you start to kind of like have this like waterfall kind of cascade of challenging mental internal conversations. So I try to steer all of my athletes away from that. As a coach, the question in the logs that I always cringe at is, what should my time goal be for this event? What should my goal be for the event?
Also finish.
The goal should be to just finish, because these things are inherently difficult, whether you're winning the race or it's the first time you've ever tried to go that distance. There is no guarantee, as you know, the stories that we talked about earlier, have illustrated. Mile 6 of the Leadville 100 for an elite athlete, ankle sprain, out of the race. I face planted at mile 1.5 in my last 50 miler. There was no guarantee I was going to finish that race at all. So as soon as you put the performance goal on yourself, you set yourself up for very challenging situations, like mentally and emotionally, and with your internal dialogue, which then can have a cascading effect on the performance of your race. So try to let go of that, like, I need to get this time. I need to get this time. I need to explain that time to people. Think about that. And then, over time, you're going to start to own that, I think, a little bit more.
Yeah.
Give yourself a chance to do that. It's not going to happen overnight. So don't expect that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's move on. Got a couple good. Let's see one here. Do you lie to your doctors?
I loved that question.
Oh my
actually.
God. Well, let's go to that one. Okay. All right. Do you lie to your doctors or physios about how much you run just to get them to actually try to figure out the problem and not just tell you to stop running? I've learned over time to tell them that I run a little bit, but not a whole lot. Is there a better way or any tips to talk to doctors as a runner?
I feel like
Wait, Kylie's like a medical
Kylie should
professional.
well,
Pretty much. I want Kylie to answer this one first.
yes. She has good tips for how to navigate the medical system.
Not a doctor, but I always
Kylie's a doctor now.
Kylie's not a doctor.
Please direct all your
Very
medical
educated,
questions to
very
Kylie.
educated.
I do suggest finding a doctor that works with athletes though,
Yeah.
if possible. But I know that some people live in smaller towns, so it might not be possible. But I feel like if you can't be honest with your health professionals, then it's probably not a good fit for you,
Yeah.
I get athletes that are like, well, my doctor won't let me get a ferritin panel or an iron panel done. And I'm like, what? Like, you should be able to be in control of what you want to order for your own health. So I feel like in that case, I would suggest finding someone else. Same thing with you always have the right to take control of your situation. So if it's like some kind of injury thing and they're not helping you through this injury situation and they're like, oh, it's just this, and then they're like kind of blowing it off, I'm like, go get a second opinion then, and same thing with the nutrition. Like, there's a lot of things that can go on nutrition wise, and sometimes and oftentimes it has to do with like GI issues, because the GI docs, they're typically pretty busy. They don't want to go through dietary things, etc. So they'll just send people home with go on the low FODMAP diet or something. And if somebody's running and trying to do that themselves, that's a terrible idea. So, so just kind of being an advocate, I guess, for your own health would be my suggestion. And I don't think you should be lying or keeping things from a doctor if they are in control of your health in a way, they're prescribing things or giving advice based on what you're telling them. So if you're not telling them the truth, then I feel like they can't do their job and give you the best advice either. And so from a nutrition perspective, same thing with my athletes. If you don't tell me the whole story, then, and you aren't seeing results, then that's kind of on you a little bit. You're not going to get the full experience.
Yeah, I just want to second everything Kylie said, that you are 100% entitled to healthcare that respects you as a full person with all of your goals and ambitions. And anyone who makes you feel less than or like you need to diminish who you are or what you do to receive consideration and treatment, then you need to find a new medical professional.
I want to kind of frame this the other way though, because what I'm hearing is that the athlete is afraid to lose running, so they will tell their doctor something
exactly
else.
But like, again, if you're scared that your doctor is going to take that away, like your ability to run is a quality of life thing. So like, then you have a medical professional that you're actually concerned that they are going to treat you in a way that diminishes your quality of life, and that is banana pants, and you need to run, don't walk, find a new doctor.
Yes.
But I guess I would say, like, if you have a doctor you're worried they're going to take away your running, like, why are you scared they're going to take away your running? Are you hiding something that, like, you can't, now, and I work with athletes that, like, will not tell their physician, like, if they're dealing with eating issues, like, they won't tell their physician certain things. And like, are you hiding something? Like, asking yourself that kind of question.
I think that's, not to interrupt you, Kylie, but I think one, yes, you guys are totally correct. You're entitled to have an honest conversation with your doctor. You're entitled to a second opinion. All of these things, that are part of this whole conversation. But on the other side of this, I think that there's a lot of pressure just got put on a doctor to tell you, yes, you can keep running. But I think it's also important for the athlete to ask, why am I afraid to say, I'm actually running 40 miles a week. I spend 8 hours a week training. And is that because maybe you're dependent on the running for a variety of different reasons? Are you afraid to take some days off?
Even then, if you have a doctor that says stop running, they're in no way treating the underlying issue, which is that you have mental illness related to exercise addiction and or exercise bulimia, and that should prompt 1 million additional questions. But like, no doctor is going to be like, oh, no more running, no further questions, see you next month. Like, again, I think that if you feel uncomfortable telling the truth to your medical professional, like, sure, like if you know that you are struggling with something that you feel shame about sharing with a medical professional, that is deeply troubling, but that's also not entirely on you. If you go into a doctor's office and you don't feel safe and comfortable telling them that you have struggled with eating issues, or that you have struggled with exercise dependency, or that the thought of not running is very scary to you, then again, you should find a medical professional or find an advocate that you can bring into the doctor's office with you, that will help you navigate that. Because again, if like I can just speak from experience that, like, having, navigated the medical system with like an eating disorder, like anytime, I mean, you're just not going to, I think it's I have a very hard time imagining that someone would be like, oh, the problem is that you run too much. Like, people, they're professionals. They're like, oh, the problem is that you have a mental illness. Let's like treat that. And then we'll like work through the auxiliary symptoms later. But like,
but this question is operating on the assumption that the doctor isn't treating like root causes, right?
Yeah, then you have a shitty doctor,
I mean,
like if you go into the emergency room with a broken leg and the doctor tells you to stop running, see you later, like, they're gonna treat the leg, right? Like, if they're a decent medical, and like, maybe this is me putting too much faith in doctors, but I think that, like, if it's someone who's just gonna not help you achieve the quality of life you want to achieve through treatment, like if the end goal isn't to matriculate you to the life you want to live, then that is a bad doctor, no matter what. Like, even if you are exercise dependent and like, that's why you're scared to like tell your doctor something's going on, like you have like, like any variety of issues like comorbid with exercise dependency, then like, again, like, that's a bad doctor.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't think there's anybody who could argue that doctor was, living up to kind of their responsibilities as a medical
But like, this is
professional.
something that like I've definitely seen with athletes who've gone to like PTs that do not specialize in working with athletes, and that's my primary concern, is like someone will see, like they live in a town that, like Colorado's different because like you're just not even going to find a PT who's never worked on an Olympian. So like you don't really have to do a lot of explaining to yourself. But like this is something I've seen with a lot of athletes that live elsewhere, is they'll go into a PT who primarily works with like older people, and that PT will be like, oh, you're not a runner. Like you're not built for running. And that is horseshit. Everyone is built for running. Find a new PT. That doesn't mean you need to be running all the time now. But like, again, if your medical team isn't 100% on board with getting you to live the quality of life you want to live on your terms, then that is, I think that's a huge issue.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that, Zoe. And I think that, whatever the situation is, if you try to have that honest conversation with your kind of, general GE, or what is that's what they're called, their general practice GP. Yeah, if you've tried to have that conversation and the answer is, well, you need to just stop running, or you've gone to your PT and the answer to that is just stop running, yeah, maybe take that with a grain of salt and consider consulting with somebody else. And I know, as Zoe discussed, like in rural communities, it can be very difficult to like connect with another practitioner, another doctor, another PT. We sometimes have the issue where we live, and thankfully, like our PTs we live in an area where so many people are athletic that like it just necessitates having PTs that deal with that. But in other areas and with other athletes we work with, that's not the case.
Yeah.
And I think that also maybe if you are nervous to talk to your doctor about these things, again, kind of trying to go back to like having that honest conversation where like, hello, doctor, I'm a little nervous to tell you X, Y, and Z because I feel like you're just going to tell me that you don't want me to run, and that's going to miss the point of what we're actually trying to work on here, which is X, Y, and Z. Maybe trying to really have that candid discussion, because I think a lot of doctors, unfortunately, are very overworked. The medical system obviously and has a number of issues. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but if a doctor's seeing 60 patients in a day and has 7 minutes with each patient, it can be very challenging to go into that office and like your expectation is probably like they're not going to like listen to me. So yeah, try to be an advocate for yourself, or bring an advocate with you, like Zoe mentioned, bring a friend, something like that, or a partner who understands you and maybe is able to be a little bit more direct.
And like the approach I would take is that like own that you are like, anyone that trains with us is training at like a high freaking level, like you're serious, like treat yourself like an elite athlete and demand that your medical professionals treat you the same.
Yeah. I mean,
that is the respect you deserve and you are entitled to. Yeah,
definitely. There's no messing around.
Because like, if you go in and you like, are like, oh, well, I'm just like a casual runner, like maybe it's okay if my doctor doesn't get it. Like, no, this is like for anyone that's on this call or listening or anyone on the team, this is like a big part of life and you're allowed to fight for it. And you're allowed to dismiss anyone in your life who's not on board with that project.
Yeah.
That's my soapbox.
Yeah. And great job. I appreciated the perspective that you and Kylie brought to this question. I think it was really valuable and definitely really helpful, not only to the author of the question, but to everybody else on the team. So great work. Yeah, let's try to hit a couple easy ones that we've like just glossed over like the last 3 weeks. We've got like 8 questions that are like a lot less deep. Which is great. Let's see here. One of my favorites. Is it normal to feel completely useless and brain dead and wiped out for the rest of the day following a long run? Kylie.
We could talk about how the nutrition could impact that. No, I mean, I think that as you do more and more long runs, you do tend to adapt to that. And I do find that people maybe don't get quite as tired after those long runs as you're doing those more consistently. And then I also think that it depends on like the terrain that you're doing them on, as well as like the intensity that you're doing the long runs at. Cause I know I have my athletes do sometimes like a tempo in the middle or like a moderate long run versus just like all easy long run. So I think it kind of depends, like that would probably make you more tired for longer. And then thinking about like, what are you doing after that long run to help you recover? So are you like doing the long run and then like not eating and running around and doing yard work? And I think that's going to impact your recovery. So all of those things are going to play a role in how you feel like the day after or 5 hours after, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say if you're frequently feeling useless after your long runs, it could be, yeah, indicative of a few issues maybe. Like one, Kylie mentioned the nutrition component. I think a lot of athletes operate under the false assumption that I don't have fitness, I'm not adapting to the work that I'm doing, simply because they're not fueling properly and taking a mindful approach to how they fuel on their runs, which is like really making sure you're getting north of 200 calories an hour, starting 30 to 45 minutes into your run, and doing that for the entirety of your run, not just for like the first 90 minutes and then letting it go. It's all about doing it the entire time you're out there. If you've got 10 minutes left, but it's time for that next gel, take the gel. It makes a huge difference. You're going to feel a lot better, especially important for athletes who are like getting into longer runs. And sometimes like with some of my athletes, like that Saturday long run is like the longest run they've ever done. And like, if you forget the nutrition component, you're already going to feel tired after these efforts. It's the longest you've ever gone. But if you forget the nutrition component, it's going to be a lot harder to recover. And so, like what Kylie mentioned, like what you're doing after matters too. Zoe
Yard
and I,
work, man.
yeah, Zoe and I always try to make sure like what we do after is like immediately go get something to eat.
Oh yeah. Like it doesn't even matter. Like there've been times where, like you finish at like 3:30 in the afternoon and you've like run through lunch and you're like there've been times where I've been like, oh, I'll just wait to dinner. And TJ's like, heck no, like we're making pizza bites. And that's smart.
Tot nachos.
Yeah. Just like you can't like even if you ran through the normal lunchtime, eat a meal after your long run. If you finish early, eat brunch.
Yeah. I think almost always when athletes are starting to feel, really, it's like really hard after runs. It's like, you're not eating enough, make sure you're eating enough.
And during, like, I would say 9 times out of 10, when people are like, wow, this long one was really hard, I'm like, did you eat 200 calories an hour? I think that's like the number one issue we run into with athletes on long runs just like, again, 9 times out of 10, it's insufficient fueling relative to output.
Totally. Again, if you have checked that box and you're like, well, you know what? I was eating 300 calories an hour. I was eating really well after my runs, and you're still feeling exhausted. The next thing to probably check is like effort level out there. How hard are you running those long runs?
Are you going to the well on all of your long runs?
Right. And so, for me, like I think Zoe and I have had some very honest conversations sometimes about how I feel when I finish a long run. And Zoe very directly mentioned to me earlier in the summer that I didn't look good finishing some of my long runs earlier in the year.
It was this question was you for like the first couple long runs this summer.
Oh, it was so hot. It just felt
you
awful.
were like wasted and like just on the couch shirtless for the entire rest of the day.
It
like
was
couldn't
so
even
hot.
make dinner.
It was like 100. I'm not built for it. It takes me like 8 weeks to adapt to the heat, not like the normal 2 to 4 takes everybody else. But yeah, so like what I did was like
you were putting some efforts out there.
Yeah. Anyways. to get to the point, effort level was not maybe quite correct for the conditions. So I really started to like make sure and to really bring a lot of purpose into the first hour of my long run and make it 2 steps easier than easy. So I could really progress into the run and finish feeling a lot better than I started. And that has made like a huge difference, especially with hot runs, dealing with the heat. Massive difference. Make your long runs progressive runs where the first hour is super chill. And this just mimics your race effort anyways. I mean, that first hour needs to be like 2 steps easier than easy. So freaking easy, especially on the downhills, where it can be very easy with gravity to get carried away. All of a sudden your legs are crushed, by mile 15, and it's because you ran too hard. So keep that in check. I think effort sometimes for athletes, just goes a little bit, we're not quite thinking about it, especially for more advanced runners who are like able to run like kind of those easy, moderate efforts on their long runs, like pushing aerobic threshold that feels very comfortable and you can hold that for 20 miles. That does take its toll, especially if the environmental factors are challenging, like terrain type, like Kylie mentioned, and heat, like I've mentioned.
Yeah. And I feel like if you feel if you feel wiped after a long run, like every so often, like definitely for me, when I have like a peak week and a training block, and then I do like a 25-mile long run, which is like very long for me. Like, yeah, you're not going to get me to do yard work or like really get off the couch. I think that like, that's fine. Like that's normal. Like if you're doing a longer than average long run, and you feel a little bit more tired, like, especially I think for me, like that's when like all the work stress from the week hits me is on Saturday. Cause that's like my day off. So I'm just kind of like, I need to not look at a screen. But if this is like something that happens on like your runs that are average and or below average in length, then that's an issue. And if it happens like every time you do a long run, that could be an issue.
Yeah. Cool. Let's end with a fun one. This is for you, Zoe. What's your warm-up music? What is your favorite running soundtrack?
My warm-up music is Lizzo always. And my favorite here, I'll put it in the chat. This is my favorite. Wait, how do I copy and paste from Spotify?
I don't know if you can.
Do you have Spotify like premium?
Yeah.
Here we go. Incoming.
I don't even listen to music while running ever. Isn't that crazy?
Whoa.
No, I don't think it's that crazy. Sometimes I just turn my music off because I want to listen to like my breath or something. Or
I like to listen to
things.
rap music.
I could not listen to that. I think you put Lizzo in there. Is that what you did?
No, I did not.
Whatever you put was like.
Do not listen to the song around children.
Not safe.
I want to know if TJ is going to sing for you on your 100-miler next week.
I hope so.
If I'll sing for you.
Like my big to-do list this weekend is updating my banger playlist.
Yeah, you were supposed to make me a playlist this summer. You never got around to it. I was going to try to come over to the Lizzo side, but it's too much. You just run too hard when you listen to music like that. It's
run
too
hard.
uplifting.
I'm gonna run hard.
I need like a middle of the road Charlie Parker. Well, cool. So Kylie doesn't listen to music. I listen to bebop, and Zoe listens to whatever she put in there.
It's either that or like audiobooks. There's like no in between. I'm either like listening to very explicit rap music or Brene Brown.
I've tried Brene Brown on my run. I can do them on my easy doubles, but not on anything more than 4 miles. It's too depleting. Well, thanks guys. Let's see. We're not going to be here next Friday, but there will be a call on Monday with Kristen. So I hope you guys can tune into that. There's a lot of really great questions that they're going to go over. We will be in the middle of a 100-mile race for Zoe. So
we will all be helping Zoe in her.
Oh yeah, and Kylie's going to be there. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a micro party. Well, cool. Thanks, guys. I hope everybody has a great day. If you've got questions, follow up about anything we've talked about, we'd really appreciate to hear from you guys. You drive the direction of these calls. So please continue to be great participants. We really appreciate these questions, especially the deeper questions, because they just provoke, I think, these nice lengthy back and forth conversations where we can really like talk about all the different facets. So yeah, anyways, have a good weekend. Enjoy the last vestiges of fall. Feels a little bit like winter here this morning. Bye, everybody.